Returning from my trip, I discovered my suitcases arranged neatly on the sidewalk, accompanied by a note from my daughter-in-law offering me the garage to stay in. As I waited for a taxi, I called the bank and realized I was the one paying the mortgage. Overwhelmed by the situation, I stood there, unable to comprehend what was happening. After a week visiting my sister in Seattle, all I wanted was to relax at home with a comforting cup of tea. Instead, I found myself locked out of the house I had shared with my late husband Thomas for 35 years. The rain clouds loomed overhead as I held the note in my trembling hands, the familiar hurried handwriting of my daughter-in-law's message sinking in. Sharing memories of building our home together, planting trees in the yard, and selecting every detail, I was flooded with a mix of emotions. 2 years ago, I had agreed to transfer legal ownership of the house to Ryan and Chelsea. However, I had been secretly continuing to pay the mortgage. As the taxi began to pull away, I frantically reached for my phone and quickly dialed the bank, seeking confirmation of my suspicions. The customer service representative informed me that my automatic payment of $1,867 had indeed gone through as scheduled the previous Friday. I thanked them quietly before ending the call. Feeling a raindrop on my forehead, I stood there at 68 years old, gazing at my belongings scattered on the sidewalk. The sky seemed to open up in tandem with my emotions, giving me permission to finally let my guard down. Looking back, I realized now the signs I had missed. The exchanged glances between Ryan and Chelsea whenever I mentioned renovating the kitchen, their subtle remarks about senior living communities, and the rearrangement of the living room during my absence last Christmas. These seemingly minor incidents were all part of a larger unspoken shift in our relationship. The tiny garage apartment turned out to be cramped. Finding the door unlocked, I entered to find a twin mattress pressed up against one wall, accompanied by a small nightstand and lamp. Clothes hung on a portable rack, while my belongings from books to photos to keepsakes were neatly packed in cardboard boxes marked with Chelsea's handwriting labeled as Mom's belongings. Sinking down onto the mattress, I felt the cold concrete below me. Looking out the small window, I could see the house where I had lived with my son, grieved for my husband, and now felt displaced in. Suddenly, my phone lit up with a message from Ryan. "Mom, we need the space as Chelsea has been wanting a home office for so long. The garage apartment is all set up for you. Please don't make this hard." It was as if I was the obstacle in the way. Tears, unexpected, welled up in my eyes, streaking my cheeks silently. Memories flooded in, the sleepless nights comforting Ryan during his asthma attacks, the extra job I took to put him through college. As the mention of Thomas's business faded away, it seemed to hang in the air unfinished. I found myself in a difficult situation. I had spent countless weekends watching over the grandkids till Ryan and Chelsea could have time together, but now I was being treated as a burden and pushed out to the garage. Rather than responding to Ryan's text, I decided to call my oldest friend Susan for help. Without needing any explanation, Susan immediately offered to come over and help me. Sitting on a thin mattress in the garage surrounded by boxes filled with the memories of my past 35 years in that house, I felt a surge of determination. This house had been my everything, a place where I had invested my love, savings, and dreams. As the rain intensified outside, I clenched my fists, knowing that despite their attempt to push me aside, they had underestimated who they were dealing with. I wasn't just Ryan's moth. As her widow, I went by Linda Harris, and I was tired of being overlooked. When Susan arrived with her nephew Ryan, I was surprised by his appearance. Dressed in jeans and a Henley shirt, he looked more like a college professor than a lawyer. However, his keen eyes focused on the mortgage statements I had brought. "So you've been making payments on a house that's no longer in your name," he remarked, with a concerned expression. "And your son and daughter-in-law have been living there rent-free while planning to sell it." Hearing it put so plainly made the situation seem even more ludicrous to me. "Yes. And they relocated you to the garage," I admitted, feeling the heat of embarrassment in my cheeks. How had things escalated to this point? Brian offered some hope, saying, "You do have options. The financial agreements could potentially be considered a verbal contract. At the very least, you may have grounds to sue for the return of the mortgage payments you've made since the property transfer." Susan, who had been unusually silent, chimed in she needs to confront them first. They must realize the gravity of their actions. Though Brian appeared doubtful, I felt a surge of determination to finally address the situation. Susan was right. Before taking legal action against my own son, I needed to give him one last chance to make things right. That's how I found myself standing on the porch of my own home the next day, my heart pounding as I rang the doorbell. I'd lived in this house since before Ryan was born, yet here I was, a visitor requiring permission to enter. Chelsea answered, surprise quickly masked with a tight smile. Linda, we weren't expecting you. I need to speak with you and Ryan, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She hesitated, then stepped aside. Of course. Come in. The living room had changed again since I'd left. My reading lamp was gone, replaced by a modern floor lamp I didn't recognize. The family photos I'd arranged on the mantel had been rearranged, with several of Thomas now missing. Ryan emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. Mom, what are you doing here? I came to talk about the house, I said. Susan told me you're planning to sell it. Their exchange glance confirmed. Ryan avoided eye contact as he spoke. We were planning to tell you once everything was sorted out. Sorted out? I repeated, disbelief palpable in my voice. This has been my home for 35 years. Your father and I built this house. We raised you here. Chelsea let out an exasperated sigh. Linda, we understand your sentimental attachments, but we have to do what's best for our family now. Your family? I questioned, feeling the pain of hurt. And what am I? A heavy silence hung in the air. Mom, Ryan condescendingly interjected, sign the house over to us. We'd appreciate all you've done, but it's our property now. We have the right to decide its fate. I steadied myself, taking a deep breath. I've been covering the mortgage for the past 2 years. Every month, $1,867 from my account to keep a roof over your heads. Their exchanged glances revealed that they knew all along. Chelsea replied coldly, that was your choice. We never asked you to do that. Tremors ran through my hands. I did it out of love and to support you, because that's what family does, I said, the hurt evident in my voice. And we are thankful, Ryan added insincerely. However, this doesn't alter the legal standing. The house belongs to us, so my 35 years residing here, my financial contributions, my role in this family, none of that seems to hold weight. Ryan stated flatly, appearing uncomfortable yet resolute. Mom, you're blowing this out of proportion. We can assist you in finding a suitable senior living arrangement. I don't want a nice senior apartment, I retorted sharply. I need my son to display some basic decency and respect. Chelsea interjected cautiously, her smile strained. Linda, it seems like emotions are running high. Perhaps we should revisit this conversation at another time. It was at that moment I realized, with painful certainty, that this situation was beyond repair. The son I had nurtured, the child I had cherished with all my heart, was no longer there. In its place stood a stranger who viewed me as a burden, problem to be dealt with. I've instructed the bank to stop the automatic mortgage payments, I spoke softly. Ryan's expression shifted immediately. Did what? If you're intent on selling my home, you'll have to finance it yourselves. Chelsea's voice rose in panic. But what about and concerned about our credit? We have plans, I replied. I hear Oakwood Hills is lovely this time of year. Ryan's expression turned dark. Mom, the house was Dad's gift to me. You know it was never really yours. His words landed like a punch to my gut, dismissing 35 years of my life in just 5 words. I understand, I managed to say, my voice barely audible. Well then, I suppose there's nothing left to discuss. Feeling unsteady, I turned to leave, taking an unexpected step. Pausing at the door, I looked back at my son who no longer seemed to see me. Your father would be ashamed of you, Ryan. And for the first time, so am I. I spoke softly before walking out, closing the door behind me with care. Later that afternoon, armed with information from Trevor and legal advice from Brian, I took another surprising step towards my new life. I applied for a job. The help wanted sign at Rosie's Cafe had caught my eye as I headed back to Susan's house. You want to wait tables? Susan raised her eyebrows in surprise when I shared that I had worked as a waitress during college. I reminded her of the importance of having my own income in life, expressing that I couldn't continue hiding out in her spare room forever. Susan pondered this before mentioning that Rosie's had the best pie in town. 2 days later, I started my first shift there. Despite my aching feet and screaming back at the end of the day, the tips I earned were a source of pride, as they were the result of my own hard work. The feeling of satisfaction that came with this was something I hadn't experienced in years. Exhausted but strangely invigorated upon my return, I found 6 missed calls from Ryan on my phone. The first voicemail from him mentioned a concerning call from the bank about the mortgage and a possible line. I chose to delete it without listening to the others, deciding that for once, Ryan would have to wait for my convenience. Susan later joined me on the porch swing with a glass of wine, asking me softly, how does it feel? As I pondered her question and watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, I felt a sense of I'm finally waking up, I mentioned, feeling as though I had been sleepwalking since Thomas passed away. Susan finished my sentence, saying, and now you're Linda again. I nodded in agreement, raising my glass in a small toast. To Linda Harris, it's nice to finally meet her. After 3 weeks of working at Rosie's Cafe, I had settled into a routine that felt unexpectedly comfortable. My tips were modest yet steady, and the physical work kept my mind occupied. More importantly, I had found a sense of purpose once more, a place to be, people who depended on me, a life that was entirely my own. That's why the sight of Ryan standing awkwardly by the hostess stand sent a jolt through me. "Mom," he addressed me, his voice softer than I had heard it in years. "Can we talk?" Rosa, the owner, caught my eye from behind the counter. "Take 15 if you need it, Linda." I nodded and guided Ryan to a corner booth away from my regular customers who had become somewhat like friends. "You look different," Ryan observes, studying me closely. I smoothed down my apron. "I am different." Ryan shifted awkwardly before continuing mum about the house. "I'm sorry for interrupting the swearing," he said with a hint of desperation in his voice. "If you came here for that reason, you're wasting your time. Chelsea and I are facing a problem. The bank contacted us about the line, and our credit scores are dropping due to missed payments." I observed my son, taking note of his expensive watch, carefully styled hair, and the expensive cologne that likely cost more than my day's earnings at Rosie's. Every aspect of him exuded entitlement and comfort, a life cushioned by someone else's sacrifices. "What do you need from me, Ryan?" I asked as he leaned forward. "We need you to remove the lane and resume the payments just until we can sell the house," he explained boldly. The audacity of his request nearly provoked laughter. "And what do I get in return?" I questioned. "We will ensure you are well taken care of," he replied as if offering a generous gesture. "There's a lovely senior community in Westbrook." "Stop," I said, raising my hand. "I'm not interested in being taken care of. I have been taking care of myself and you for years." "Mom, please be reasonable." Can't continue. He looked around the cafe and then stated, "You're almost 60. I corrected him, 58 to be exact. "And I'm doing fine." Ryan's expression hardened, his pretense slipping away. "Fine. What do you want?" "A percentage of the sale?" I gazed at the man who resembled my son but felt like a stranger. "I want my home back," I asserted. Ryan blinked, then laughed nervously. "That's not possible. We've already made an offer on the house in Oakwood Hills." Unmoved, I replied, "Not my problem." Ryan's face darkened as he warned, "It is your problem if you want a relationship with your granddaughter, with any of us." The threat hung in the air, manipulative and harsh. My own son was using my love for his daughter as leverage. "Are you threatening to keep Emma from me?" I asked, feeling a mix of hurt and anger. Ryan looked momentarily remorseful but continued, "I'm just saying families should support each other. Chelsea and I have a plan for our future. You're standing in the way." I countered, "The way I stood in the way when I paid your college tuition. When I watched Emma every weekend so you too could have a couple times. When I signed over it. The houses kept making payments so you could buy that boat last summer," Ryan flushed. "That's not fair." "No," I said, "it's not." My break was almost over. I stood up, straightening my apron. "I need to get back to work, Mom, please." Ryan's voice cracked slightly. "We need this. The house in Oakwood Hills is perfect. Can't lose it." For a moment, I saw the little boy who used to climb into my lap with scraped knees, looking to me to make everything better. But that boy was gone. In his place sat a man who saw me as nothing more than a means to an end. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "But I need something in writing from you with Chelsea first. Meet me at Brian Wallace's office tomorrow at 2. Relief washed over Ryan's face. "Thank you, Mom. You won't regret this." As he left, I wondered if I already did. The next day, I arrived at Brian's office early, my stomach in knots. I barely slept, rolling over and over the decision I'd reached in the middle of the night. Ryan and Chelsea arrived precisely at 2, both dressed. As if she were in a boardroom setting, Chelsea's smile was strained yet triumphant. "Thank you for coming," Ryan began. "Mrs. Harris has reviewed your proposal regarding the property on Maple Avenue. We appreciate that," Chelsea smoothly interjected. "We are confident that we can come to a mutually beneficial agreement." Brian slid a document across the desk, and Ryan picked it up. His expression quickly shifted from hopeful to confused to enraged. "What is this?" he demanded. "That," I replied calmly, "is my proposal for lifting the line. I am willing to resume the mortgage payments, but on the condition that the house is sold to me, not to others." Chelsea snatched the paper. This is absurd. You want us to sell you the house for the remaining mortgage balance, which is far below its actual value. It holds sentimental value beyond just financial worth, I explained. Ryan's face turned red. Can't do this. Ryan interjected, the house is legally ours with a lien against it, which significantly complicates. Chelsea defiantly declared, we'll find our own attorney. I calmly replied, you could try, but the legal process is lengthy. Your credit will suffer, and the dream home in Oakwood Hills will be gone before a decision is reached. The truth hit hard. Ryan accused, you orchestrated this from the beginning, ever since we moved you to the garage. Denying it, I softly said, I just stopped allowing myself to be taken advantage of. Chelsea abruptly stood up, suggesting a private discussion. As they left, Ryan subtly nodded in support. Unsure of my actions, I pondered if I had become as cold as them. Moments later, they re-entered with somber expressions. Ryan reluctantly agreed to my proposal, warning of the impact on our relationship. Steadfast, I acknowledged the consequences and reflected on the moment they left my belongings on the sidewalk. Please leave a comment with the city you're tuning in from to show your support. Subscribe to my channel for more compelling tales of betrayal, strength, justice, and victory. Make sure to click the notification bell to receive updates on new stories that might resonate with you. Remember, your journey continues and your strength endures. Stay resilient, stay courageous, stay subscribed.